So today on the bench I have this Toshiba SA-725 receiver, and I've had it for 30 years, and I bought it new, and it's just been sounding deader and deader as time has gone on. So it's working, but it just doesn't have a good sound. It's not very loud, and so I'm just gonna open it up and I'm gonna recap it and just take a look at stuff and bring it back to new if I can. Then the power amplifier, here's a SDK 463, and I know this is not the original. The original one burned out after about 2 years, and then I took it in for warranty work and had it replaced. That was many years ago. It's worked fine ever since. Kind of a nice big power supply. I think it's about 20 watts per channel, a little more. Looks like there's much of the original lighting left. I'll have to replace that with LEDs, but it's got the nice heavy dial, great big volume knob. Seems kind of stiff now. All these could use a little cleaning. But it's got a beautiful face. So it doesn't look like it looks like our stereo light's working. It looks like it's a little bit off. I think station here is 101.3, so it should be about here. So that's kind of off. And also our gauges don't seem to be working. So I'll probably have to take a look at those as well. So I'm looking at the left channel and just putting 1 kilohertz into it. And I'm just kind of showing, and I'm running into an 8 ohm resistor, and I'm just showing the FFT so I can see where the distortion happens. So distortion, right around 15 volts. So if I take 15 times 15 divided by 8 equals, so that's about 28 watts. I think that's more than it's rated for, but it looks good. So that's my left channel. So I'm just doing a sweep now from 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz, and you can see that we're changing our wave size quite a bit, from about 15 to 18 RMS volts. That should be flat all the way across. Now we're looking at the right channel. It's not as bad as the left channel, but it's still changing quite a bit. Looks like the right channel's cranking up a lot better. Yeah, the right channel putting out a little bit more. You don't seem to be putting too much heat out here. My resistor here is getting a little bit warm. So here's the back side. It's actually gives pretty good access to all the different circuit boards. I have a little problem getting in here, but the whole power section and the power amp I think are going to be pretty easy to recap. So I'm going to get started on that. Okay, so now I'm going to recap, and I'm just going to talk a little bit about how I go about getting all the capacitors that I need. So I've got a service manual, and I go through and I find all the electrolytics, and then from that, then Toshiba's kind of nice. They number them in the different sections, like phono, power amp, power supply, preamp, tuner, and so I just put them into categories, and then they're numbered. The number that appears on the circuit board I put here, the size, and then the voltage, and then from this then I can go and I can buy all the capacitors I need, and so that then I buy one kind for the power supply, which are more general purpose one, but then I bought audio caps for the phono and power amp and all the audio components. Then I buy the nice Nichicon audio capacitors, and so that then I just go through each section, check mark off each one, and here's the circuit board layout, and I use that to find where help me find where actual parts are. The other thing that can help you on this circuit board is that the if you look, there's a little tab on the minus side of the capacitor, and then here's where it's numbered here. But that depends on your circuit board too, but that makes it awfully convenient because you've got the number here, you've got its polarity here, and most of the devices are accessible from the back on this circuit board, so it won't be too hard to process. So I'm just going to one by one go through each of the capacitors, use my solder sucker and take it out and put in the new one. Well, it looks like I'm going to have to take this off to get to some of the controls and some of the capacitors. So I'm going to take this off, but first I'm going to have to put tape on the string because I don't want the string coming off. We'll see how successful I am. Well, there I finally got that front off. I don't know whether I'll have to restring it or not, but it does give me access to the controls, so I can lubricate them and clean them up, and access to these capacitors, which I was having a bear of a time getting to otherwise. Spraying some deoxit in the controls. So on this stereo and others I've seen like this switch here gets corroded, and so I'm going to take the switch off and clean it out. Okay, before I do, I'm going to put tape on all these different parts to hold them together. Trust me, this is from experience. So once you take this back bolt off, the whole thing just falls apart. So you have to fart around and get all those rods back in place. So I'm just going to put some tape on that to hold it. And also, just going to put a line across it so that when I open up I know the right direction to turn it, and I know which way is up. This inner part can also rotate around, so I'm going to mark it as well. So I did all the recapping, I cleaned out the switch, put it all back together as much as I needed to, and it sounded pretty good.
763 extension 2 for free help today. This winter.
So I've got it working now. I've got some music pumping through it, and sounds really nice. So now I've got to work on the lights, and I got to work on these meters aren't working either. So I got to get those freed up. So here's the light strip, and here's what it originally looked like. It had these kind of bulbs here that this one's out, and I think at some later point I just replaced it with a single LED and a resistor. But I'm going to change this around. I'm going to pull everything off here, and I'm going to use some daylight, or I'm going to use some warm light bulbs, and I'll use 3 in each spot. So now I've got a little problem as I broke this here, and so I'm just going to use a little bit of fiberglass and epoxy and see if I can glue that up. So here's the final on the lights. So I put sets of 3 LEDs to replace the old bulbs. Here's where I cracked the circuit board. I just put a little bit of fiberglass mesh and then put epoxy over it, but I had to do it underneath the LEDs. And then I added a bridge rectifier here, drilled a couple of new holes for those leads to go through. And then on the other side I just brought the minus and the plus through the old holes for the wires. And here I just put a big chunk of wire across here to bridge where the circuit board had broken. But then I just cut the trace and put a 220 ohm resistor across. So this is the positive rail, this is the negative rail, and so I just have a current limiting resistor here, here, and here, and it seems to work pretty good. Now the only thing I have left on the lights is I do have to take a little sandpaper and scuff them up so it diffuses a little bit better. So here it is. Yeah, beautiful. Now I just have it hooked up to my signal generator, and I'm just going at 1 hertz and exercising it, seeing if I can loosen it up. So there it seems to be working a lot better. I mean, I don't know. You just have to be really careful, I guess. The thing I check is that if it goes all the way over, you let it go, it should return to 0. It's looking pretty good. This is at about 1 volt. This one's kind of stuck too. Well, it's getting better. If I put 1 volt in, but it's still sticking. So I'm going to try loosening this up a little bit. Back to life. So here I'm all done. I've cleaned it up, put it all back together, and really happy with the sound. Okay, so I'm running a 1 kilohertz signal into the amp, and going to crank it up. We start to distort, so we're distorting right there. Right about 16.1 volts RMS. And so if we take 16.1 times 16.1 divided by 8 ohms, about 32 watts, which is really much higher than this amplifier is rated at. And you can see I'm driving into a pretty large resistor. It's starting to warm up now. And yeah, so that's a pretty good output for this amp. Here we're sweeping from 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz. It does diminish a little bit in the high end. I don't know why, but looks pretty close. So you're not seeing it shrink up or expand anywhere. I'm pretty happy with that. So here it is, my Toshiba SA-725. Like I said, I bought it in like 1978 or 79, and it just feels really good to have it back into its how good it sounded, and I remembered it sounding when I first got it.